So I just want to welcome everyone here today. It's the monthly meeting for the Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy and the World Intellectual Forum. It's a kind of joint thing we do. And I hope that yes, two main issues on the agenda today, which is Ukraine, obviously, what the world's doing, what we can do more, and also the Middle East today. We're going to discuss a new declaration I put together with Gina's help and others, Middle East. So we'll start with Ukraine, and then second half on the Middle East, which is very important too. They're not unconnected, as we'll discuss. So let's go around first, introduce ourselves. So I'm Dr. Thomas Daffern. I'm a philosopher. I was elected coordinator of philosophers in 1990 in Moscow, which I've been listening to a biography of Putin. Was exactly the time he was to prominence in St. Petersburg in the KGB. And you could say we're at completely diametrical opposite poles of thought. I've been working on peace issues ever since. I was working at the University of London to create a Peace Studies Institute, which I'm still running. And I'm an academic, devoted 30 years of my life to peace studies. So whereas Putin's done a different journey, let's say, we'll discuss that as we go along. Then more recently, I got involved with the World Intellectual Forum based in India. I'm the European coordinator, and they're a sort of new group trying to wake up thinkers around the planet, but not having much of a voice at the moment, because in India, the Indian government is being neutral in this conflict in Ukraine. So then there's a problem, as we'll discuss in a minute. Okay, that's my introduction. Hello, everyone. Why don't you go next, Larissa? You've got your video on. Put videos, Sean.
Hello, everyone. My name is Larissa Karachevtseva. Originally, I'm Ukrainian. I'm from Kiev. I work and live in Kiev. Currently, since March, I'm a temporarily displaced person and scholar at risk. So I spent several weeks in Netherlands. Later, I came to Austria, and currently I'm speaking from Vienna, from apartment in Vienna. So actually, what else? My background, I'm a philosopher. I'm working in Institute of Philosophy of National Academy of Science. I met Thomas Daffern in India a couple of years ago. So, and since then, I join sometimes to the intellectual forum. Thank you.
Right. No, thank you. Well, welcome, Larissa. Sean, your turn. You're on.
Oh, yes. Well, hello, everyone. And Thomas, thanks very much for the monthly meeting to keep us all in contact. My background is a bit like Thomas's, working in the area of peace studies and peace research over 20, 30 years. So it's quite an interesting challenge, the conflict in Ukraine. So really that's my background. So I'm interested in today's meeting from a peace point of view, because over the last 30 years, the various peace movements have come and gone. The European nuclear disarmament movement was very strong at one stage. The War Resisters International, the Peace Pledge Union, all those organizations, and they wax and wane. Hopefully they'll make a comeback in response to the conflict that's now in Europe. But it's hard to know. So that's my introduction. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sean. And you're just living somewhere outside Dublin, aren't you? You're speaking from the Republic of Ireland.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm based here in Ireland, just outside Dublin.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. Welcome. Okay. Gila, your turn. Hello. Welcome.
Hi. I'm from Israel, born and bred in Tel Aviv. I have my academic degrees from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I was counseling, a teacher counseling and a teacher counselor. So I worked as a psychologist and in this field of education in many aspects. Later on, turned to communication, and later on I added marketing, and at the end, alternative medicine. That was all in the past. In the last 20 years, I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm interested in the connection between science and spirituality, how to close the gaps. 20 years ago, it was very difficult to do it. Today, it's very easy. I teach the Keys of Enoch, which is a book that does this, was written even for this purpose, to close the gap between science and spirituality. And I coordinate for Thomas, his work in Israel. That's it.
And Gila, yes, we've had some great journeys in Israel. We went to interview people and set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission there. So it's important work you're doing, Gila, and thank you for joining us. Okay, Nicola is our media person, my partner. She likes to be quiet and stay in the background and doesn't want to say much, but her work is absolutely vital to the technical side of everything and keeping me on an even keel. We've been joined now by our dear friend from India, Dr. Mishra. We're just doing introductions. So would you like to?
Yes, good evening, good evening.
Hello. Just tell us a bit about who you are and what's your work and so on. Introduction. Dr. Mishra, can you hear me?
I can hear you a little.
Okay, so do just tell us a bit about yourself. We're just going around introducing ourselves for now.
Okay. Hello, I am Dr. Professor K.P. Mishra from India. I am basically a scientist, now a retired scientist in nuclear field. And now I am at the moment visiting professor in Mumbai University. Also, I am the emeritus professor in Jain University.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Mishra. And we'll hopefully hear from you a bit later on. Thank you. George, you've joined us from Africa. Welcome, sir. Do introduce yourself to the group. Just say a few words of who you are, what you do. Yeah. Can you hear me? George? We're not hearing your voice. If you want to introduce yourself, now's the time. Okay, it looks like his screen is frozen. George, you can introduce yourself when you hear me properly, okay? But George is an academic who teaches in Africa and is a peace studies expert himself. And I think is involved with the network of Catholic higher education institutions throughout Africa.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And
yeah. Okay. George, we're having some technical difficulties. Do introduce yourself if you can.
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can, now we can, yeah.
Oh, great, thank you very much indeed. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And I'm happy to be here with you today. I'm George Mutalemua. I'm a senior lecturer in development studies at St. Augustine University of Tanzania. I'm also the executive secretary of the Association of Catholic Universities and Higher Institutes of Africa and Madagascar. I also organize global peace webinars on peace studies for sustainable development in Africa every Wednesday. And I believe that also some of you will also be joining us soon. And we just finished actually a meeting. We expect to have a conference there. And so given time, we will share more about that. So it's my pleasure joining you. And thank you, Thomas Daffern, for inviting me.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for coming. Okay, so look, we'll make a start. And we're going to go to Ukraine. I think we're going to, I'll just say a couple of words of introduction, and then Larissa should give us an account of what, in her view, has been going on. I just want to summarize the Institute of the World Intellectual Forum. We issued this joint declaration, which quite a few people have signed, more are signing all the time. George has signed it, et cetera, et cetera. And just to run through it very briefly, just for the sake of others, what we're calling for is an immediate ceasefire. I noted that the UN Secretary General was in Kyiv yesterday giving a talk, a press conference with Zelensky, saying the same thing. That is the UN's position. And that should be the position of all right-thinking people, you know. The first thing you do with a war is you get a ceasefire. We're also asking for a withdrawal of Russian forces, at least back to the line that was there before this nonsense kicked off in February. Obviously, you know, that would be the minimum. Peace talks to get underway without preconditions, which, you know, I'm constantly amazed at how pathetically incompetent the peace mechanisms are in different countries. You know, why haven't there been peace talks immediately? Then number 4, we asked for intellectuals to examine all sides of this debate in detail once we've got a peace ceasefire. Faith leaders should be involved. I'm disappointed that different kinds of Christians seem to somehow justify invading a sovereign country in the name of their version of Christianity, like the Russian Orthodox cabal around Kirill, who is known to be an ex-KGB guy. I mean, you know, this is not Christianity. This is just fake window dressing. So I'm saying, no, let's get the faith leader, the genuine ones involved. You know, let's get the real proper Orthodox living saints and Catholics and all the rest of them, and Jews. And, you know, there's a strong pagan community as well in who worship the old Perun deity. Let them be involved. They're also into peace. And let them all sign the Interfaith Peace Treaty, which is the first one that's ever been written, which I wrote a few years back. Then I've suggested this idea, let's have philosophers, and Larissa can talk to this in a minute, but you know, I've had a message from our Russian philosophers in private saying, you know, I can't speak publicly, but I'm with you on this. I want peace, you know. The trouble is, of course, they're not able to speak publicly. End of defamatory speeches, end of Russian protesters being arrested, rights of conscientious objectors to be accepted. And then this thing about neutrality, in item 10 of our declaration, we've said mutual co-neutrality, you know, like, I think we should re-examine this concept of neutrality. And I've traced it back to the Jain idea of Hanikant Vada. So I do a little philosophical thing in that. I've put in number 11 is politicians have to tell the truth, because we're never going to get peace on this planet until they're forced to tell the truth in public assemblies. I'll keep banging on that. With Gandhi, he was a satyagrahi. We have to hold on to the truth in politics. I've also said that politicians need a regular mental health checkups. I think, you see, any other responsible post, like if you're a policeman or a teacher or whatever, you have to make sure you're sane or you can't do your job properly. How come politicians get away with being crazy? I don't understand it. And then they should take trainings in conflict resolution skills. I think that should be mandatory for all politicians. And then 13, every country in the UN system and NATO, EU should establish a ministry of peace. India China. You know, we should all have a ministry of peace. Why do we live in a world where it's acceptable to have a ministry of war? I'm paying taxes that my country's going to go and kill people, bomb them, whatever. And the ministries of war around the world have millions and millions of incomes, dollars, you know, pounds, trillions. And yet, I think only Costa Rica and Sweden have anything like a ministry of peace. Why doesn't Ireland, you know? So I'm saying in this declaration, loud and clear, let's have ministries of peace that would be officially mandated to prevent wars. You see, they should have prevented this war. And if we had a ministry of peace, they could have done it. Then there's my thing about the European Union could have prevented this if it had a mediation service for conflicts on its borders. I foresaw this war in Ukraine in 2008. I saw it coming like a premonition. And I immediately wrote to the EU saying, you need a mediation service. You know, this might not be the only war that happens on the borders of the EU. And by that, I include the Mediterranean, so Syria, blah, blah. And finally, women to play important roles in the peacemaking process, because we know from Africa that when the women get involved in Sierra Leone, then they make peace. So I would say ban men from the, I mean, you know, we've got, anyway, that's another point that I think needs to be said. So having said all that, that's the declaration. I hope most of you have signed it and agree with it. You know, but over to Larissa. That's my little introduction. What more can we do, and what else can we do, and what are you?
There is one point I want to clarify. Thomas, last time we spoke with you in February, and we have discussion about this petition. Is it right? Yes, it was February. Later, I was busy with my...
I think it was February, yeah.
February, yes. And I did several comments about that petition. I apologize to everyone because probably I have my own biases. Probably I have my own mental stage, which is not okay. But I'm totally disagree with point 2 and point 6. And it seems to me we discussed with you. Therefore, I cannot, under any condition, sign this petition. I'm sorry for that. So point 2. Point 2. Yeah. And it seems to me we mentioned in our correspondence the immediate withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine back to the border of Ukraine as on February 14, 2022. I understand that we are fighting for minimum, yes, but as a Ukrainian citizen, I demand the body which on March 1, 2014, before Crimea and Donbass occupation, this is territory of Ukraine, and this is a very strict position of every citizen. That is why I would never, under any condition, sign this petition, you know, with this element. Second point, I mean point 6. Point 6. Ukrainian Institute of Philosophy in Kyiv, first of all, this is not right, this is not correct spelling of my city. This is Kyiv, this is not Kiev. Kyiv, this is a Russian spelling. Ukrainian Institute of Philosophy in Kyiv to offer to host talk on the philosophy of peace with their Russian colleagues, and Russian Institute of Philosophy in Moscow to invite their Ukrainian colleagues. Dearest Thomas Daffern, Institute of Philosophy in Moscow has their own position about the war, and they support President Putin. That is why Ukrainian colleagues, under any condition, will invite Russian colleagues in Kiev. Plus one point, I'm presenting here, and I want to underline this, I'm presenting here as a private person, not as a representative of Institute of Philosophy. You know, I can't say, you know, to represent official position of Institute of Philosophy. We are not ready to invite any Russian colleagues in Kyiv. We are not ready. We are not psychologically ready. We are not financially ready. We are in a very severe fighting, you know, and if you said me, so I ask you, really, maybe it's my mistake and biases against, please remove my signature from this treaty. Oh, okay. I'm not ready to sign it.
Thank you.
More than that, if you go into a little bit more concrete stories, you know, my apologies again. Probably I'm in troubles right now, and I'm telling not right thing. but it were five people on emergency visiting scholar here in Vienna who were Ukrainian refugees. And it was invited one man. Apparently, it was clear that, first of all, it was surprising because men are not allowed it to leave Ukraine. You know our law from 18 to 60. Men are not allowed it to cross the border. And apparently, we found one man on this position. And later, we discovered that the man has passport of Russian Federation. He escaped from Moscow. In Russian Federation, people could obtain two citizenship, 2, 3, 5, so it's legal. From Ukrainian point of view, it's illegal. So people, just imagine, whole Europe invite Ukrainian refugees, yes? From Kiev, from other cities, from Mariupol, etc. And people from Russia escape from Russia and present their passports and substitute their self of people, of women and children who escape from that territory. So, Thomas Daffern, how do you think what I'm thinking right now about Russian colleagues, Russian philosophers? They are cheaters and nothing else. So please remove my signature at least
no, I will. Yeah, I understand. Right. Well, that's obviously do you want to comment any further about the, forget about the petition, just generally, tell us about, anything you'd like to, philosophically about, I mean, you must be shocked. We're all shocked that Russia's done this. We're shocked that Putin did this. What? I mean, it must be, I suppose you're not quite so shocked because you've been used to it ever since the invasion of Crimea. You saw it coming, didn't you?
Yes, actually, speaking philosophically, so let me just breathe and think about Anikantavada and about everything. So I think right now it will be a huge revision of our basement of peace. So how could we communicate reasonably? How could, first of all, what I'm thinking about, this deal about petition, about writing petition, about fighting, it's presupposed as a certain ethos of people who believe in public claims, who believe in, efficiency of public claim. What I see right now in political context and context of my country, this is no matter how much you could publicly, speak about peace and about peaceful agreement. This is nothing. I'm sorry, I will turn back to Kiev and I will speak with raped people, raped women, raped children. So, and I see total inefficiency of those declarations. This is what I could say about from philosophical points. So what is our goal? What are we intend to do with those petitions, with those claiming, with this? So this is my second main question about, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm too emotional maybe to take a, neutral statement.
And I'm sorry to hear you say you've talked to women who've been raped. And that's, shocking to us to hear that's going on. And I know the Secretary General of the UN was there.
Doesn't mean that I will speak or intentionally will speak. It means that if right now I will come back to Ukraine and I will found 5 people. So one of them will lose their property. 3 of them will be raped or losing their children, and one of them will be, without cut its arms or legs. This is our reality right now. It doesn't mean that I will do it intentionally. We have, next generation will be highly traumatized in Ukraine, highly traumatized. We don't know how to deal with that.
Right. Well, no, that's, thank you. Very moving testimony and shocking. So would anybody like to comment now on the Ukraine situation? We have a colleague from India, Ireland, and elsewhere. George, would you like to say something from the African perspective? How you see this? Because one of the problems, I mean, amongst millions of other problems, is the knock-on effect of food prices. In East Africa, I believe there's now going to be an increased risk of famine across many parts of East Africa. I don't know if Tanzania is affected, as the basic staples that Ukraine and Russia are the sort of breadbaskets of, you know, Africa and Europe. And so prices are escalating, and Africa's already got food insecurity, and now it's getting worse. So if there was any reason to stop this war, that's yet another reason, because of its knock-on effects. Would you like to address that problem, George, and how you see what can we do?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. And of course, I join Larissa and everybody to express, of course, our shock about what is happening in Ukraine. And it is really, yeah, difficult to say what it is really, because it's something that we didn't expect. Probably many people didn't expect this. Of course, some, as you said, Thomas, that you could see it coming, right? Because of Crimea, etc. But the way I saw amongst many analysts, actually, you know, were saying war was yesterday, you know. So they couldn't think that there was a possibility of any war anymore. And I know one of the authors who says that now actually in 2060, there will be no war. Of course, today the situation in Ukraine just reminds us that really we are very fragile. I think really as world, should I say, leaders, thinkers, and philosophers, etc., that we need to rethink about how to peaceably coexist. And as you are putting it, the prices of things have already gone up. And now for us, it's a kind of double trouble, because on the one hand, we blame Russia or the war in Ukraine, and because it is related to the rise in prices of things, including food, etc. Really now buying a kilo of rice has actually increased almost by double, and not only rice, but many other commodities. But some people, particularly business people and politicians, take advantage of this. So to say, well, you know, prices have gone up so that, you know, they can just take advantage of that because the government might get more tax, which does not actually trickle down to people, you know, at the grassroots. So for us, this has created another opportunity for some people, you know, to enrich themselves. And, you know, for example, there was a day I just saw on social media. I come from an area where we grow so many bananas, and we eat, you know, as cooked bananas or plantains. Now, this is served without anything else. So no beans, nothing, okay? And somebody's saying it's because of the war in Ukraine, right? So I don't think that we don't have beans because of the war in Ukraine, right? But of course, the situation might get worse, but some people actually are misusing that. And that's where now the Ubuntu philosophy actually needs to also come in and see really that we definitely need to talk together. Somebody should be able to say, well, enough is enough, let's start afresh. So thank you very much. That's my humble contribution.
Thank you very much, George. That's very moving. Yes, I have a friend who's involved with the Human Dignity Research Council, which I also serve with Dr. Evelyn Lindner, who has been a foreign minister of Rwanda. He gave a brilliant talk about Ubuntu, what it means at our last conference. Could you just tell, for those that maybe don't know the term, can you just explain what Ubuntu means and how could it be applied if you could get Zelensky and Putin in the room and explain to them what is Ubuntu, what would you say to them?
All right. Okay, thank you very much. That's actually an interesting question. Well, Ubuntu, I'll begin etymologically. It's a word that comes from this group of people around Eastern Central Africa. And these, we here say mtu or mtu, meaning a human being. And actually, I've got actually my son here who is interested in Ubuntu, and if you'll give him a minute or two, he could just say what he thinks Ubuntu is. Yeah, no, so thank you very much. Let me have him, please. Sit here. So
good afternoon, good evening, everyone.
Yeah, hello. Yeah. Tell us what Ubuntu is in your words.
Ubuntu is an interesting story in Africa. One day, an anthropologist asked, create a game for all children in Africa. He had a bucket of sweets, 8 sweets, put near a tree. Then all the children stand 100 meters away. Then he said that the first one to reach to the tree, near the tree, will have all of the sweets. Then when he said ready, steady, go, do you know what the children did? They hold their hands tightly and start running until the tree divide all 8 sweets. And then when anthropologists asked them, they answered Ubuntu, which meant how could one person be happy while others are not happy? That is the end of the story. I am because we are.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very eloquent.
So thank you very much. You know, there was a day, he was just, I just had told him about Ubuntu, my son, and liked this story. And the other day, he went to class where he studied for primary school. He's just 9 years old. And when he came back, he told me that I told this story to my teacher. And the same day, actually, I had told the same story to my students at university. So I thought, oh, we were talking about Ubuntu. But I was trying to say the etymology that Ubuntu is a word that comes from human, a human being is mtu. Now, humanity, this is Ubuntu. And it doesn't really refer to people in this area, but means everybody, which means that we have to care for one another, you know, and as we heard in this story that I am because we are. So we all are interdependent and we're equally important and our needs are the same, our worries are the same. So we all need peace, for example, whether in Russia or Ukraine or over the world.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, George. Yes. I mean, as a philosopher, I've looked at the history of African philosophy, and Ubuntu's got a very deep history, and we could go into that. Maybe on another call, we'll have a meeting on African conflict, because there's obviously problems in Africa as well. But thank you for sharing that. And Sean, would you like to comment on what you've heard so far?
Oh, yes, thanks. So that was a good story from Africa. Thanks very much. We're just getting back to the bigger picture. I didn't sign the petition either, but I'm still thinking about it. Now, I know what Larissa was saying there for her reasons for not signing. But you see, we're on a peace forum, and my thing is that, well, it's maybe my age, but there's been so many wars that I've tried to, you know, negotiate or study, you know, on the sidelines over the last 20, 30 years. And I'm afraid this war in the Russian-Ukraine war may be only at a very beginning, an early stage. And the amount of casualties now could be very small compared to if we're talking here this time next year. I'm thinking of the conflicts like, I know it wasn't, you can't compare, but in Syria, like the casualty rate of 500,000 or more people killed over 10 years, murdered, slaughtered, whatever you want. So we don't want that to happen in Ukraine. So we really have to try and stop it. And I don't know if anything that I've heard coming from the Ukrainian side has given me any light that this could be stopped before it becomes really a massive conflict in the center of Europe. So I'm kind of worried about that we're taking it too simply, because wars like this have a very, from a historical point of view, a potentiality not to stop themselves. Somebody has to stop it. And if the peace people can't, and I think what Thomas was saying, we could see this war coming. And the same with the breakup of Yugoslavia so many years ago. Years before Yugoslavia broke up, there was peace conferences about how Yugoslavia could break up without going into violent conflict. And we weren't able to address that, or the peace movements, or the people who look at a peaceful solution to conflicts had no answers to that. And I'm not sure we have any answers to the Russian-Ukraine one either, but we just have to try. And I admire Thomas for putting forward that declaration. I know there is few issues in it that Larissa has and other people, and I would have as well. So I'm just listening today anyway. So thanks, Thomas.
No, thanks, Sean. That's very important. I think one of my concerns about why I'm frustrated is that, you see, because they have ministries of defense and they have weapons manufacturers, the war system, I mean, Sean has written a brilliant book about the war system, the peace system. The war system is so well organized compared to us. They have huge salaries, huge infrastructure, hyper-tech stuff. And the war ministries in every country, you know, they love this. They love this war, because look at Boris Johnson, total hypocrite, now pretending to be a great statesman. I mean, he's destroyed Britain's relationship with Europe. On the one hand, he peddled all this anti-European propaganda, and now he's playing it both ways. Now he's going off to Ukraine and posing as a war hero. I find that sickening and distasteful intellectually. I mean, so my frustration, where's the peace rooms? You see, like in the Pentagon, there's a war room underneath the White House. If there's a crisis, you go in the war room and there's maps on the tables, and, you know, and it's all kitted up. I want a peace room in every country as well. Because you see, to me, peace should have more priority than war. Kavshala, can we hear from you, Dr. Mishra, briefly, and then we'll get back to Larissa and see if she's got other things to add. Dr. Mishra, you've been listening. What do you see from an Indian perspective? You're a scientist, right? You must be frustrated at the stupidity of humanity. We're becoming pre-scientific, aren't we? You'll have to unmute, sir. You just press the little microphone thing.
Yeah,
there.
okay.
Good.
Yeah. What is your question?
Well, what do you think,
Thomas?
Scientist, how do you see this war? How can we end it, sir?
Okay. Well, I see this war as a crisis of global leadership. There are no leaders who can influence the warring groups to bring to peace. So my very clear vision is that the global leadership is the real crisis. In terms of our views, there must end the war. War must end at any cost. Whole humanity must work for it. And so we at World Intellectual Forum. But merely saying and wishing and praying war is not going to end, because there are vested interests. And I see that no serious effort is being done at the government level, global government level, to end the war. So in summary, I should say war must end, and we should do whatever we can do. But we should be aware that issues involved are complicated, and therefore our wish may not come true, and peace is going to be costly in this case. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mishra. I mean, just final comment before Larissa is that one of the things I find really annoying intellectually about war as a philosopher is it polarizes humanity. It cuts Ubuntu. It divides us into black and white, European, Asian, Russian, Ukrainian. I mean, and that to me is a false polarization. It's what we call Manichaean in philosophy. Whereas I believe in unity as a philosopher. I want a monistic worldview. If there's a unity, and that's what all the monotheistic traditions are based on, that in the heart of reality, there's a divine unity that wishes the well-being of us all, whatever name we give to that. It seems to me that war is a blasphemy. It's an epistemological error, to use philosophical terminology, you know. And I think the crisis of global leadership is a crisis of philosophical leadership. I mean, Putin has a degree in law from the University of Leningrad, but he didn't, you know, the academics didn't train him in the difference between right and wrong. You see, there should be more compulsory philosophy classes in law graduates, and it should, for me, it should be a core component. You shouldn't be able to leave university without knowing the difference between right and wrong, surely. I'm sure George would agree that that's what they try and do in African universities. Okay, Larissa, you've heard us. Can you see any hope here as a philosopher? What, you know, can we dry your tears somehow?
My tears will fall many days after, but let me say one optimistic thing, not as a philosopher, but Ukrainian. Right now, I'm a Ukrainian citizen.
Sure.
So first of all, about global food crisis. So Ukraine do their best, absolutely best, to produce as much wheat as we can. I think for 70% of field is already, how to say, we do some certain agricultural work to. So we very acknowledged about this food crisis. That's why Ukrainians do all their efforts. So we are doing all our agricultural things on the bombs. So you know, literally. So, and probably it won't be so bad as people expected. Probably, maybe some prices could be a little bit more than before, but in general, we keep things more or less okay. This is first thing. What about global crisis of global leadership? Oh yes, you know, actually, what we're watching, again, from Ukrainian perspective, maybe it's not your perspective, that people actually could do nothing with Mr. Putin, you know. So it's no mechanism how to stop actions when they already have a character of genocide style action. What else? About what you said, that we, in condition of the war, we became more divided. Oh yes, you see me, you heard me, so I'm not friendly with Russians no more. You see me, I'm philosopher, I'm professional philosopher, and I'm a person who works in ethics and many things. So I still have some friends, but friends in Russia. But those friends, it's very brave people who are not afraid to go to the square and stand with the protest, signs. They speak with me via Facebook absolutely openly and openly say their position, and they are not afraid to be caught and to be in jail, etc. Other friends, for instance, maybe Thomas, you remember one Russian woman from
Delhi.
The Delhi conference. Her name is Lada, who is a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
In the beginning of February, I mean, in the middle of February, I just asked her, could you please join us in World Intellectual Forum? It's because we have tension already. It was tension with Russia. She just didn't respond to me. I understand that she will keep her silent. She don't want show to any services, secret services, that we somehow connected with her. This is position, and also I see some colleagues from in the Facebook from different Russian state universities. They are using so-called Aesop language. They are metaphorically tell that somehow it's not okay with us. So referring not to directly to the events, but to their cats or to their pets or to their weather. So just say in these metaphorical languages that somehow they are disagreements. People, what's going on with humanity? People cannot say openly their opinions. What's going on?
Sure. No, it's
that's my shadows on your reflection of what I heard.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we've got another 10 minutes on Ukraine, and then we're going to switch and discuss the Middle East. Gila, did you want to mention anything? What's your views of the Ukraine war? How's it seen in Israel? I read in the news that there was a rocket attack on Kyiv yesterday, which killed an Israeli spokesperson who used to work for the Israeli embassy in Ukraine. Do you want to comment on the Ukraine situation from an Israeli perspective? You'll have to unmute, Gila.
You hear me now?
Yes, now we hear you fine, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So first, I would like to sympathize with Larissa and the Ukrainian people. Of course, we are very sad that this is the situation there. And Israel sent a field hospital with doctors to help them. Generally, what can I add to what people have said until now? We all know what happened in the Second World War, and this can turn also to a Third World War, I'm afraid, because it's a crisis of leadership, as the professor said. And also what you have said, that there are war offices, but there are no peace offices. So, it's going to continue like that unless something, you are talking about fame that may come and we won't have enough food to eat. So then people will realize that they have to do something else. Unless something very terrible happens, it's all about interests and power and dividing the power in the world. And when you have leaders like Putin and there are a few others like that all they care is about power, that's what you're going to get. So I think we need to concentrate on the young generation, because the hope is there. This boy that spoke about, told us this beautiful story. This is the time to work on the future consciousness of humanity. And there is the hope that I can see, because the others care mainly about interests. That's what I have to comment.
Right. Thank you very much, Gila. That's
a pleasure. Yeah.
And I'm glad you're meeting Larissa here, because Larissa's work is on the history of Jewish philosophy. She's an expert postdoctoral researcher, so I hope you two will get to be friends. Because Gila is an expert on the Kabbalah and is an amazing mind.
Yeah, she can write to me if she would like something, you know, we might
chat to each other. But yeah. I want to just say a few words before we move on from Ukraine. We're going to discuss the Middle East in a minute. I prepared a few remarks about Ukraine as an intellectual historian. My PhD was on the history of East-West intellectual search for peace and the Cold War. And I'm a specialist in East European, Russian history and so on, among many other things. And I've done a lot of digging around into the intellectual roots of Putinism, to give it its name. I think the more I read about it, the more I discover he's a residual KGB operative, low grade, but he was brainwashed into KGB mentality, which is you use every dirty trick in the book, blackmail, bribery, honey traps, and thuggery, killings, assassinations, to make sure your side wins. Back in the day when there was a really strong Cold War between the West and Russia, that's what they used to think. Well, Putin is like a residual throwback. He never grew up. He's stuck in that 1940s, 50s Stalinist mentality. You have to bring the other side down. It's shocking. I mean, and there's a very, very good biography about Putin being broadcast by BBC Radio 4 at the moment. They've done a lot of research into his background, his early youth, his childhood. And, you know, he was a street thug. He joined gangs. And when he was only a teenager in school, he went to the KGB headquarters in Leningrad and said, I want to train and be an operative. How can I join? They said to him, go away, Sonny, and you'll have to do a degree. You'll have to come back when you're a bit older. And he said, well, what shall I do as a degree? And they said, well, do something like law. And he did. And then he went back, you know, with his degree and said, now can I join? And, you know, why did he want to join the KGB? Was because he already was a gangster. He was already involved in street fighting. He's a thug, right? And he decided the KGB is the biggest gang in town. If you want to be a successful gangster, you join the biggest gang. That's why he joined the KGB. And he worked his way up. And in the chaos of the end of the Cold War, you see, not enough attention was paid, I think, by intellectuals, by cultural educators. We should have done more to decommission the mentality of that KGB mentality. And in the West, you know, the CIA types were doing the same. What we in Europe should have done, because I was part of the European nuclear disarmament movement. I was a friend of E.P. Thompson, Mary Kaldor, people. We wanted a kind of peaceful, neutral Europe between the superpowers, in which the European Union, we could all flourish together. But for that, we should have done more to decommission these fanatics who'd been psyched up into this hate mindset. And unfortunately, we missed this guy, Putin. You know, I didn't, he wasn't on my radar. He became the bag carrier to Sobchak, who was a law professor and an intellectual. Sobchak was a genuine intellectual. I believe Sobchak would be horrified at this war, what Putin's doing. Putin is his protege, and Sobchak was a genuine philosopher, thinker of law, who was probably murdered. You know, if you research Sobchak's life, he ended up being killed in 2000. I believe there's a lot of evidence to point to the fact that Putin's rise to prime power was on the back of the Chechen War. The Chechen War against Grozny and the rebels, the Russians lost it in 95. They couldn't defeat, so the army withdrew. But then what they did is they did dirty tactics. and the evidence is pretty clear that they faked some attacks on apartment buildings in Moscow, said it was the Chechen rebels, and used that false flag thing as a pretext to go in really hard. And what the Russian army did with Putin in charge was destroy Grozny. They flattened it. Like when Russia goes to war, it doesn't play normal. This is what my terror fear is. They're going to do what they've done to Mariupol. I mean, God forbid they keep doing it to any other cities. We have to stop them, or they will do it like they did to Grozny. Because that's how Putin fights. He's done it in Syria. They've done it to Aleppo and some of these ancient cities. So I've been reading a lot of books, Luke Harding, Shadow State, about Russia's cyber warfare, because they're not only fighting on the ground, destroying cities, they're promoting Putinism as a sort of intellectually viable critique of the West, capitalism, and so it's a sort of residual KGB psyops warfare. Unfortunately, some of the left in Europe have swallowed this. They're not very clever, unfortunately. And Mélenchon in France, who's just lost, thank God, to Macron, who I support. Mélenchon is kind of typical European leftist who says, oh yeah, but we don't like NATO either. We want France to leave NATO. We want to be totally peace-loving. And Putin's got a point, like Ukraine was Russian, wasn't it, after all? Type of idiocy going on. And I'm sorry to say that Jeremy Corbyn was the same, because although I, respect him as a man, his intellect wasn't up to, the man that controlled Jeremy Corbyn was a guy called Seamus Milne, who was his minder. And Seamus Milne was a Putinist who was going off to talk to Putin. And that's why the Labour Party never stood up against Brexit, because it was Putin pulling the strings of the left in Europe. And and they also reach out and seduce the hard right in Europe, like Orban and Le Pen in France here. So why are they doing it? Well, because they're bloody clever at psycho ops and war games. And if you're a thug, the other thing that I learned from my studies in the last few weeks, I've been really working on this, is Putin actually loves this. What he did as a boy was play war games, and he used to love, the reason he wanted to work for the KGB is because of the power it gives, the power to destroy. He loved the thought that he has all this power in his hand and he can make life and death decisions for millions of people. He's sitting, looking at his nuclear button and getting a real kick out of it intellectually or psychologically. Now, I think this is a psycho. This is a sick man. And our job, I'm a philosopher, I believe in healing, like Pythagoras. We have to heal this guy before he presses his button. I discovered also that this is a sad thing. Where did he go on honeymoon? He got married in the 80s. Does anyone know where Putin went on honeymoon? He went to Ukraine. He went to Kyiv, sorry. And, you see, I think deep down, as a psychological reflection here, all aggression is a sort of call for love. Putin's argument is, we love Ukraine. They're Russians. We love them. We're Christians too. We want to love each other. But the gangster, the thug, doesn't know how to say, I love you, let's be friends. What they say is, I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to dominate you. It's a sadistic kind of love. It's Russia loves you so much they're going to come in and destroy you unless you kneel down and kiss our boots, So that's the pathology of love. When it goes wrong, it turned into violence. So anyway, that's just some thoughts about what I've been doing, studying the kind of ideological roots of all this. But any healing we can do, much appreciated. Let's send. And Larissa, I don't think prayer is powerless. I just want to say, you said no, prayer's no good, it's not going to help. I think it is. I'm a believer in the scientific, as Gila would say, the scientific power of prayer. And if billions of us around the planet do prayer for peace, it will work, I think. Okay, Larissa.
Yeah, I just want to respond to that remark. I do believe in power of praying. That's my, because I'm a believer as well. But actually, the action of declaration of public statement presuppose a certain ethos. I mean, presuppose a certain culture of people who believe in the efficiency of declaration. That's why this is my point. And actually, you know, you said about Putin, who is gangster. I'm very much agree with that. But so how could we do a public statement, you know, communicating with a gangster? I think Gila need to switch off her mic.
Sure.
Yes, and
got a phone call coming through.
Yeah.
But
so
yeah. Okay, so we could go on more, but let's move and look at the Middle East because it is connected, and I'm hoping Gila will be our lead person on this. But let me just introduce the issue. So I know you don't like declarations, all of you, but I love them. It's what philosophers do. We issue declarations. Sartre did it. Bertrand Russell did it. Einstein did it. You know, it's our bread and butter. Academics write learned articles. Well, philosophers for peace issue declarations, and I'm not going to get out of the habit. I'm sorry. But so I was asked by the World Intellectual Forum chairman, Dr. Swaminathan, who sadly can't be with us today, but he sends his love and greetings from India. He said, let's have a little working group and draft a declaration on the Middle East, because, you know, I pointed out there's been a lot of tension there in the last few weeks, particularly. It's been Ramadan, and there was a big fight up on Temple Mount the other day. Israeli police arrested, I think, 300 people. There were stones being thrown, and maybe Gila can tell us in a minute what was going on. And there's a prophecy going around there's an Islamic, I don't know what you call him, some kind of intellectual who believes that the state of Israel is about to come to an end, and that he's prophesying this is going to happen by the summer. And so this is getting everybody worked up in Palestine, but throughout the Islamic world as well. And so they're all kind of joining. This is causing trouble. So I put together a declaration, which I think I've sent most of you. I can send it to you again. It's a draft, you know, it needs tweaking. I've said the first point is the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians have been going on unchecked ever since World War I, and it's high time to resolve it. You know, I've always been struck by Israelis and Palestinians are both highly intellectual people. I used to know the head of the PLO delegation to London and the Vatican. It was the same guy. He was a genius, and I met loads of Palestinian intellectuals in London. I've read a statistic somewhere that Palestinians per head have more PhDs than any other country in the world, apart from Israel. You know, so surely we can get a solution here. And I've drafted some possibilities there. I've just finished reading a biography of Netanyahu, who's never really been my favorite person before. I've like most kind of left-leaning people in Europe, we don't like Netanyahu because he's quite right-wing. But actually having read the biography and studied his writings and his words in detail, I have to say that his fundamental theme, I realized is a true one. And this is, I say with some, you know, humility. He's always been saying, he said it to Obama, that he's happy for a two-state solution. He wants a Palestinian state, but only on two conditions. One is that that state should sign a non-violent coexistence treaty with Israel. It shouldn't become like a place where you can stockpile weapons, where Hamas can have missiles and guns and bombs, you know, because that would be a terrorist state. Obviously, no responsible Israeli politician is going to agree to that. So that's the first condition. It should be a peace-loving, non-violent Palestine. And all the Palestinians I've met would agree to that. I don't understand why they won't agree to that immediately. Then they could get their state. The second thing, the condition, is that they should sign a recognition of Israel's right to exist. And I find it ridiculous they haven't done that yet either. I mean, Israel's not going away. Of course it exists. It's a state. It has a right to be there, you know. And so I would have thought that's just obvious. So I've suggested in the wording of the declaration, there should be a coexistence, right to exist declaration by an independent Palestinian peace state and Israel. Because as a philosopher, and I'm sure others will agree, you know, as that word Ubuntu was explained to us, I exist because you exist. We exist in each other's eyes. We coexist. So Israel and Palestine are like the two fingers of one body. And then the last thing I say in the declaration is that, you know, for details, I think we should use, and I know not everybody would necessarily agree, there was a very detailed declaration signed by Netanyahu and Trump, of all people, and I'm not a Trump supporter. I think the guy should be in prison. But the one good thing he did was do this peace declaration for the Middle East. And it had some really good ideas, like an airport for Palestine, massive economic aid plan if they sign the peace deal, and a seaport for Palestine, which they desperately need. Now, all this, if I was a Palestinian leader, I would say, let's sign it, let's do it. Let's haggle about the details, but let's do it. So I'm saying let's use that as the basis going forward, and then we can reconvene a forum to discuss the details, because there's issues about boundaries and, you know, there's millions of questions. The other point that I make in my declaration, and this is something that, again, Netanyahu's always been bashing on about, I researched it, and I think he's right. He's been grumbling about the Iranians, as you know, saying that they want to destroy Israel. I thought he was being paranoid. I didn't take this seriously. But then I looked at the tweet sent by the supreme leader of Israel, Ayatollah Khamenei, back in 2018, when he does say, and I've looked into it, it's 9 points he makes in his tweet. And he says that the Zionist entity should be dissolved, by which he means the government of Israel, and that nobody should be allowed to vote in a referendum on the future of Israel who wasn't living there in 1948, that all Palestinians should be able to come back and vote. But like people like Gila, because they weren't born or whatever, wouldn't be allowed to vote. So all the later immigrants to Israel who'd come in from Europe or America would all be disenfranchised according to his idea. And honestly, it's not realistic. It's just it's a fantasy. And so I've suggested in the treaty that old Khamenei needs to take this tweet back and apologize. You know, it's just fantasy. And until he does, it's going to continue to annoy people like Netanyahu, and it won't be resolved. And I've suggested, because I know a lot about Shiism, I'm an expert in Islamic philosophy. I love Shiism. I love Ali. I love the great Imams. There's nothing in Shiism that says that you should be anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish. On the contrary, you should be supporting them. They're your friends and brothers. And so I've suggested there be an Iranian-Israeli theological peace forum set up for Israeli intellectuals and Iranian. And they need to work out a theological justification, because Khamenei's saying, theologically, we have to destroy Israel because God says. Well, I'm saying no. I've read the Quran, I've done a commentary on it. I think it's a different God he's talking about. There's nothing in the Quran that says you have to destroy Israel. You should, so there's some theological work needed there. Okay, that's a summary. It's a 20-point declaration, and you know, please look at it. It's just a draft, so it's not open for signature. If you want to improve it, if you've got some ideas, let me know. Right, now let's hear from Gila. That's my little introduction about where we're at here. Gila, what's your comment on the Middle East crisis? Tell us what's been happening. You'll have to unmute.
Hi. So I must tell you, Thomas, that you've surprised me with your last declaration. We know very well that you love declarations.
Yes.
And maybe this is a tool of a philosopher.
Yeah.
Personally, I must tell you, I don't have much faith in it. Let's put it this way. But I admire your the fact that you don't give up, and you are such an optimistic. Sorry. Anyway, you've surprised me with your last declaration, because I really think that you made a real effort to balance and to establish a good starting point for any peace way. Let's put it this way. It's very well balanced. I would like, I know you sent them. I would like them to see what I wrote you as well, because it was easier for me to express in writing. But in any case, what I would like to, the point I would like to make is that the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian, as it appears in the media, it's a conflict about a territory, but basically it's not behind the fights about the territory or the words about the territory. It's a much deeper conflict. I don't have any other word to say. It's not, you say, the things that you said at the beginning of your explanation or talk, that you take it for granted, or it's obvious, or you don't understand why the Palestinians haven't signed it so far, so long. This is the main issue. For them, it's not as trivial as it for you. This is the main thing. The cause of the symptom. The territory and the fights and all the other things are the outside their symptoms. But at the very basic, you say that we've been talking for many years, and you always told me that Islam is love, but we don't see this love here. We've never seen it. When Israel started, when the people from Europe started to arrive in Israel, when the British have the mandate, and even before, after the First World War, what the people, the Jewish people who lived in Israel, they always wanted to live in peace with the Arabs, but they've never accepted us. The thing is first to accept us and to that we belong to this place. They don't want to accept it as a definition, as a starting point. And they don't think that we have the right to exist here. I'm not saying that there are not philosophers, the people that you have met, and that understand, that have a different point of view, but still the main core of the conflict are, I would say, religious leaders, that it's a politics and religious together, and they use religious not for the love of God, but for the hate of God, I would say. It's the same as Putin. You said it's not Christianity, and I'm saying it's not Islam as well. Because all they want is, and Iran is not this word that you use, barbling, or I don't know, something like crumbling. It's not crumbling. It's a very well established policy of the Ayatollahs, that they don't want to see Israel in the region. It's a threat for them. And they support with money and ammunition all the terror movement around Israel, the Hezbollah, the Hamas, the Jihad, you know, you name it, there are so many. So it's not going to end. We tried not your, but you know, we tried to give back territories. And even I ask you this question, why before the 1967 war, we were small Israel, and they didn't want us as well, they didn't accept us as well, and they've started a war as well. So there was very tiny Israel, and before, when in 1947, when the UN gave us a very little territory for Israel, Ben-Gurion accepted. They didn't accept it because they don't want us here. That's it, basically. And this haven't changed. This haven't changed, I'm sorry. And Jordan, 80% of Jordan is Palestinian. Why before 96-7, they didn't ask for a separate Palestinian state along Jordan? They accepted to be part of Jordan. They didn't have this ethos of a Palestinian state, I would say. So, and all these things that we see, you asked me about the Temple Mountain and the riots that we see there.
Yeah,
and everybody speaks about sorry, everybody speaks about the Israeli police, but the Israeli police is there to maintain the order. They try to be as nice as possible and they stay out. But what can we do? What would you have done? Or, you know, what everybody would have done if those people would, like the young generation, were brainwashed by this terror Islamic propaganda, and they gather together, they flock together at the mosque. They come at 4 o'clock even. They come with blocks. They come with fireworks, Molotov bottles, all kinds of things. And they start, they turn the mosque to a fort, if you'd like to say it like this. And they start destroying it on the people who happen to be there, the Jewish people who pray beneath the mosque at the Wailing Wall. You know, you can't just stand and do nothing. You know, the Waqf is Israel after the 67 war gave the Jordan Waqf, as they call it, to run the place of the mosque. But they also they can't do anything against these youngsters that come with fire in their eyes and in their hearts to kill.
Sure.
Clarification, Gila. In spite of what I'm saying, every day 100,000 people, and I think last Friday even 250,000 people came to pray. I mean the Arab ones, the Muslim ones. So if Israel wouldn't have kept the order, how they would have been able to pray? They wouldn't have been. And if I can tell you that they themselves, many people among themselves, they don't want these riots. But you know, there are some, the Hamas and the Hezbollah and Iran and all they are inflaming it.
Sure.
And that's so I wish you luck with this, with your declaration. It's a very good one, and I hope it will be a basis for really for actual implementation of steps. But you know,
no, you're
reality right now it's going on the other direction. Right. My hope is that we need to change the consciousness of people. And if we said we need to have, as you said, peace studies and to teach more people about peace and love, and we are all part of this magnetic field in this planet, and that we influence it. And you know, all these new theories, I would say, they need to penetrate deep into the minds and the hearts of the rest of humanity. Otherwise, we won't be able to see a difference. That's my
right. Well, no, thank you. Very eloquent, Gila. And you know,
I tried, you know, thank you.
No, very important points you've made. I mean, my philosophical comment, and then I'll hand over to colleagues, is I used to teach at the Muslim College in London, which is Britain's senior Islamic training college for imams, for a couple of years. And I think there's a problem of education here within Islam. I mean, I'm a Sufi, I'm a person that can see the good aspects of Islam and can resonate with them. But I'm also highly critical of the bad, and I'm aware of those too. There's always been a crisis within the Islamic world, ever since Muhammad was here. Even in his entourage and family, you know, the minute he died, there was a war broke out between followers of this faction and that faction. I mean, so, you know, Muhammad's Quran is a wonderful text, but only if you have the right hermeneutic skills to interpret it. And that's where higher education comes in the Islamic world. And there's not enough of it. You know, if you study at the highest level in Islam, as my colleague, Dr. Zaki Badawi, was teaching in the Muslim college, who was my colleague, you know, you understand to interpret the Quran in a rational, empathetic, compassionate, and intelligent way, which is how Muhammad would want us to interpret it. What's happened is that people, warlords, right from day one, the minute Muhammad was dead, and there's some evidence he might have been poisoned, by the way, just to let you know, it's very sad. The warlords got hold of this thing called Islam and turned it into a sort of war business. In those days, it was camels and swords and bows and arrows, but it was war business, looting. And in the name of this revelation, they then said, oh, well, all the other revelations are gone, the Christian and the Jewish, we can loot their stuff. Unless they sign a treaty and agree to be peace-loving, you know, with us and let us be the top ones. And this, I mean, it's a scam, I have to say. It's not authentic Islam. I'm going back, I'm saying, as a scholar of Islam, we have to go back to the roots of what Muhammad actually intended. And I want to say there is good news that I'm not a voice in the wilderness. There are some really great, amazing Islamic scholars around, and people like me, Islamologists, right, who are experts in Islam, who are saying the same. And I want to share a little story for Gila's benefit. A friend of mine on Facebook, who's a Muslim, he's a Western convert, an American, I think, or British. He's done Umrah, he's been to Mecca, you know, he's done everything properly. He was in a mosque just a few days ago, and the imam gave a really fiery sermon. Well, we have to get the Israelis out of Jerusalem. It belongs to the Muslims. We have to conquer them, you know, all this stuff, war jihad stuff in Britain or America. In Britain, I think this was. And a Muslim guy in the audience went up to the imam at the end and said, look, I don't agree with what you're saying. You're totally talking nonsense. This war rhetoric you're saying is not Islam. And he argued with the imam for 10 minutes publicly in front of the whole congregation and put the guy in his place and said, no, that's not Islam, you know, thank God. So there are discussions going on within Islam all over the world. People know that it's not. Of course, they shouldn't be stockpiling weapons in a mosque. And I'm shocked, utterly shocked to my soul to hear if they're dropping stuff on the people down at the Wailing Wall, the Jews' holiest place where they go and pray. That's like unbelievably wrong, you know. And if you've got any evidence that that's true, send it to me, Gila, because I'm utterly shocked and I will write letters. It's the other thing I do, by the way, as a philosopher, is I write letters. I'll write to the head of the Waqf on behalf of the World Intellectual Forum and complain. That's a shocking, disgraceful act, because that's where the Jews go to pray, and to drop stuff on them so it could kill them is just like unbelievable barbarism. And no Muslim I've ever met, and I've met hundreds, would ever countenance that behavior. So there's something going wrong. There's whoever's the educational authorities for the Waqf, who's ever in charge of that territory, needs to get their act together and discipline these kids. And if they've been brainwashed by Hamas and ideological fanaticism that says the only good Israeli is a dead Israeli, let's drop stuff on them and kill them, they need to be they're like Putins, they're like thugs. They need to be excluded from Temple Mount, in my view. And you know that I've had this vision for ages of let's reopen the Golden Gate, turn it into a peace sanctuary. But precondition of that is that to get onto Temple Mount, you should sign a non-violent declaration. I think that there's an argument for you're not allowed up on Temple Mount unless you have no weapons on you and you sign a non-violent declaration. I believe in peace. I will not commit acts of aggression when I'm up here on Temple Mount. It should be declared an ahimsa site, a non-violent site, and nobody should be allowed there with weapons and the intent to kill and harm, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, or whoever. So that's my little response. Anyone else? Larissa, do you want to come in? Because you've studied Israeli thought. Have you ever looked at Islamic thought? Have you studied Sufism or Islamic mysticism at all?
Actually, it was not a proper study, and I would say it's rather touching that issues. And of course, I have some classes on Jewish mysticism. Of course, I know about Sufis because it was very interesting things. And actually, but I'm very much, we need to think about one thing. You say about people not enough educated about Islam, yeah? There is not question of education. There's also question, you think it's question of education, yes? So they are not illuminated enough to know that Islam is about peace. They illuminated enough that Islam is about peace. But we need to also take into account of some personal peculiarities or their will to, to take their own position. I mean, not to follow what some people think or thought, but also this will to protest, like your colleague who converted to Islam, protest publicly in front of Imam. That is why I'm very much, I think that Gila description is quite correct, and I may just resonate with another issue that Muslim movement in Russia, they see situation in Ukraine, war in Ukraine as a jihad. So this is a saint war against kafir, against
what?
Yeah, you understand? Yes. So
Russian Muslims fighting Ukraine.
Russian Muslim in Russian Federation, they totally agree Putin's politics, and they justify that Putin's politics as a jihad, as a saint, saint holy war. Yeah, holy war.
But that's absurd. That's absurd.
Of course, this is absurd, but I can't say that they are not illuminated. They are just, manipulated with information in order to obtain right political, goals. This is my point. That is why I think Gila is very much correct that this is not about education. This is about something else, about your position as a citizen. Your also political education, by the way.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm shocked to hear that, because I know there is also an Islamic brigade in Ukraine that are fighting to defend Ukraine, and for them too. Am I right? There is an Islamic battalion.
Actually, you're totally right. And I have a lot of Islamic Muslim friends as well. And this is just a very strong division between Muslim people in Ukraine and Muslim people on the territory of Russian Federation. They have their own fights against each other on that issue. Yes, this is true. This politics, and totally agree with Gila. It's
well, thank you very much. Any other comments? Aaron, you've joined us from India, from Agra, I believe, where the Taj Mahal is, built by one of the great Mughal rulers of India, who was a Muslim. I'm a great fan of the Mughals. They were highly intellectual, Akbar in particular. So you're speaking to us from the Mughal heartland. We're discussing the Middle East problem, Aaron. What do you think? You've read the declaration. What do you think of that call for peace between Palestine and Israel?
Yeah, good evening and good morning, whatsoever, wherever we are. Thank you so much, Professor Thomas, to include me in this discussion. However, I know I'm from Agra, and Agra is having a lot of, Mughal Empire precious buildings, including Taj Mahal, Red Fort, and, Sikandra, and many other places where I reside, and I keep seeing, since my childhood. And these are, the pride of country, and all this, tourists or as country leaders, they are being, other than Delhi, they come to Agra, and we are proud of this indeed. Regarding this, yeah, I'm a signatory for that declaration. I appreciate that peace and dialogue and, this thing, peace should be there. Peace should prevail ultimately. But unfortunately, due to greed of human and some situations and the fight and the hate, this all prevails because in the physics, it is given that entropy remains always in any physical reaction. So I believe it's all entropy. It leads to the randomness and, some mistakes, and nothing becomes, ultimately true in this world. Regarding Islamic things, I appreciate no religion is bad, and no religion is having even bad scriptures. It starts always with the good motive in the world. But I think so with the time, many things happen so that there remain mutation. It's like biological knowledge, if I say that with the time, a lot of mutations occurs. And this is called mutations in this, belief and thoughts also. Got disconnected.
Yeah, I should explain whilst.
Yeah. So right now, this Middle East problem is because of probably misinterpretation of the scriptures. Like Holy Quran, I was in Doha for 1 year during my postdoctoral associate. So I had a lot of Muslim friends in Middle East, and Doha is quite safe. Doha and Dubai, UAE, like I appreciate almost 10 countries, but many countries like Syria, Iraq, they have a problem even now. And the problem arises from the misinterpretation of the things. And probably for that purpose, I would recommend that there should be more literacy, and literacy of, the true feelings. Like as you had a lot of friends and you are associate with such things, they should interpret truly in case of a humankind, okay? There should be love for the humankind. There should be no hate. There should be no violence. And there should be equally respect to all the Homo sapiens over the globe. But let's see how the things goes on. And now I do see that like Dubai, UAE, and Kuwait, and Qatar, having the literacy and the economy, they are progressing, and probably they're not believing in such things. Like Dubai and Doha is very, very modern, and they invite, they don't give like a dress code, and many things are good. So other countries should emulate this. But Taliban is doing wrong, and Afghanistan is very pathetic because we are neighbor, and even like news anchors, female news anchors are not allowed. So I think they are wrong in their side. That I don't appreciate.
Right. Okay, thank you, Aaron, for that. There is, I mean, extending to look at the wider Middle East thing, in the declaration I've mentioned the Abraham Accords that Israel signed recently. If Gila could talk to us, what are the Abraham Accords and why do they matter? Which countries have signed this peace agreement? Because they were trying to say, we're all children of Abraham, let's declare peace between Israel and Islamic countries. And some of these Gulf states have signed it. Can you tell us who signed it, Gila, and what's...
Yes, I would like to tell you with pleasure.
Yeah.
I think this agreement that was initiated by Trump and Netanyahu, it's implemented a new thinking in the area, in the region. And to focus on the advantages of peace and coexistence. And the countries that, the Arab countries that went along that is the Emirates and the United Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and two more, 6 countries signed this agreement.
And what was the agreement?
And it really turned the atmosphere. I mean, it really turned the atmosphere. Prior to this riot at the Temple Mountain, it really turned the atmosphere in the region. I mean, they come and visit us. We go in there. There are cultural, not cultural, economic agreements. It was getting normal. It was getting too normal. So that's why we have the riots at the Temple Mountain, because they want to stop it.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. These Abrahamic Accords are important peace initiatives.
Yeah.
I just want to share one synchronicity with you, Gila, particularly for your ears, but I'll share it. Okay. So in my questions, I asked Gila what she thought of Abraham and why is Abraham important, because he's supposed to be the father of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. All 3 monotheistic religions look back to Abraham and regard him as a sacred figure. And so I think Gila's response was very brief. She said, yes, he as a father, he would look on these wars as very upset for his children, you know. But I want to share a synchronicity that happened the same day I asked you that question, Gila.
Yes.
I go up and I do an hour away from the computer. I do some reading, books, you know, get away from the internet. And I'm reading a very interesting biography of Helena Blavatsky, who was a Russian, actually born in Ukraine. And she was a mystic, a world traveler, and she set up the Theosophical Society. And I'm reading a book by a woman called Jean Overton Fuller, who was a friend of mine, she's dead now, who did a forensic detailed biography of her life story, amazing work. And she discovered that definitely Blavatsky was in Tibet. In 1868, she went to Shigatse, which is where the Panchen Lama lives.
Yeah.
And Jean Overton Fuller proves this, right? Because Blavatsky was interested in the esoteric traditions of Tibet. As I am, that's, you know, of great interest, Vajrayana Buddhism and stuff. And the real core of that is the Panchen Lama, not the Dalai Lama. He's the political head. And what she discovered is that she spent 2 years in an ashram at Shigatse with her spiritual teacher, who was called Morya. And Gila and others, if you know about Theosophy, you'll have heard of this figure, Morya.
Of course I heard about her.
Okay. Morya is one of the Mahatmas who founded the Theosophical movement. But he was a real person. He was a Nepali seer, you know, apparently a very tall man, loved all religions, and he worked with Blavatsky. He taught her in person. at Shigatse in 1868 to 9. And this to me is really interesting because like it proves the essence of Morya. Now, Morya had 2 disciples with him, according to Overton's work. One was called Kuthumi, and the other was called Jual Kul. Jual Kul was a young disciple, age 14 at the time, when Blavatsky was there. So she met them both. And that's how these great figures, the masters, became the founders of Theosophy. Now, I was really interested in that. I'm reading this book, and then my eyes popped out of my head because I just asked you about Abraham. And I read that all the Theosophists believe that Morya had been the reincarnation of Abraham.
Is that so?
Yeah, I didn't know that before. I read it on the same day I asked you what you thought.
He has a very interesting name, Morya. The Mount of Morya is another name for the Temple Mountain.
Yes, there's that too.
The original name of the Temple Mountain in Hebrew, it's Ara Morya.
Well, there we are.
Abraham had this sin with Isaac, that he was supposed to sacrifice him to God. It was on Ara Morya.
Right.
So it's a very interesting linkage, I would say.
Well, I wanted to share that with you because if it's true, and we can debate whether there's reincarnation and how it works. I mean, if Abraham actually was Morya and he founded the Theosophical Society, to me it rings true because the Theosophical Society works for peace on earth through interfaith dialogue between science and religion. It doesn't believe in race or religious bigotry or anything, or gender bigotry. It's open to men and women and so on. So to me, it makes perfect karmic sense if Morya was Abraham. And so I think I got the answer to my question from the gods on the same day I asked you, Gila.
Yeah. Very interesting.
What he's doing now, I mean, that was in 1868. Later, Jual Kul lived on to the 40s and transmitted these texts to Alice Bailey. Some of you may have heard of her. She was a disciple of Jual Kul who lived on to the 40s. But, I wonder what poor old Morya is trying to do now. Because the trouble is the Theosophical movement has split. And going back to Aaron's point, and sectarian splitting seems to happen. Now it's a biological thing, like cells divide. So Morya wanted the Theosophical Society to be one great universal force of love and peace. But there's the Russian branch of the Theosophical Society, there's the different factions within it. And Alice Bailey and Jual Kul tried to unite them all spiritually, which is kind of what we're trying to do with the World Intellectual Forum, actually. But I don't know if, Larissa, can you tell us, is there a branch of the Theosophical Society in Kyiv, in Ukraine?
Actually, I think yes, because when I attend a seminar on oriented studies, and some people who followers of Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, attended our seminars. So I don't know for sure, but it's more than likely some branches of this Theosophical Society exist. And of course, there are plenty of people who are interested in teaching of Blavatsky and Gurdjieff and people. Yeah, so I think, yes, it exists.
I'll try and find the address and I'll write to them. If we could get the Russian branch of the Theosophical Society and the Ukrainian branch to both sign the peace declaration or a version of it or something, that would be nice, I've met Russian Theosophists, and in fact, Gila, at the meeting where you and I met, do you remember, in London? It was at the Theosophical Society headquarters years ago. It was a conference on wisdom education. There were people there from Moscow, do you remember, who were connected with Theosophy and Rurik?
No, I don't remember that, no.
Okay, so no, they had come all the way from Russia to the London meeting. You'd come from Israel. And these other people were fans of Theosophy and Rurik and all that, who was another great mystical intellectual working for peace back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, early 40s. In fact, I've just finished reading a book, which I'll just share briefly, about him called Red Shambhala. I'm going to put it in chat, but you've probably heard of the word Shambhala, all of you. It's the Tibetan Buddhist idea of the kingdom of God, effectively. It's a mystical kingdom that you get through Mount Kailash. It doesn't exist on this physical plane, it's a spiritual place. Anyway, what I discovered is some early Bolsheviks in Russia, friends of Lenin, were Buddhist Shambhala followers, and they wanted to make communism a kind of Tibetan Buddhist Red Shambhala movement. And one of them was the head of cryptography for Lenin, like the top spy. And this book, Red Shambhala, Google it, by an American historian of ideas, has discovered all these papers suppressed and hidden about the Bolshevik Buddhist movement that was trying to create, what they were saying is that Marxism would never work in Russia, it's too mystical. So they had to have a metaphysical side, which had to teach ethics, because Marx didn't have any ethics. It was just about power. And so the Red Shambhala movement said, no, we should marry up Marxism, communism, with advanced theosophical mysticism, Vajrayana mysticism. And they were all going to Tibet. And they were friends with Rurik. And of course, Stalin killed them all. It doesn't end well, this story, because Stalin knew what they were up to. He had every single one killed, you know. So just be quiet. Don't let Stalin know what you're up to. But what I'm annoyed about is they've gone back to bloody Stalinism in Russia. Where are my Red Shambhala devotee people? Larissa.
First of all, I already found a web page of Theosophical Society. I put it in chat, so you may see it. Okay. Theosophy in UA in Kiev. And yes, by the way, some shadows about Shambhala, and that some communist leaders was very much inspired by these things. You know that Putin also, Mr. Putin is also very much in some occultic practice, and he is surrounded by shamans and people. It's probably not only rumors, but half unofficial information that he has 13 shamans around. So it's very interesting how totalitarian regimes connected with some, spiritual things. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've read that about Putin. I'm aware of that. But you see, what he hasn't got, and why I'm against these dark shaman types, and Putin is a dark occult-inspired leader. They haven't got the importance of ahimsa, non-violence, which is why I support the Jains and the Buddhists and the yogis. You know, developing occult powers for violence is wrong. That's why Buddha said, don't do the siddhis, you know, don't do magical powers just for ego purposes to make your country great. You have to adopt non-violence. And I would say to Putin, if he ever gets to see this, that he has to completely convert away from the dark shamanism that he's been surrounded by. These people are devil worshippers, you know, and adopt the path of true nonviolence, which is the path of true enlightenment, which is why I'm teaching a course with my friend Satyen Raja from Canada, who's in Costa Rica, who was going to join us for this call, but, you know, I'm waving on his behalf. We're teaching a course on enlightenments together every month, which, you know, you can't get enlightened if you're still fighting and killing and raping and torturing. And Russian troops are torturing people in Ukraine. You know, this is black magic of a very base and ridiculous kind. And so the true white magicians of the planet, which is us, which is the true intellectuals, have to stand up against it and say loud and clear, no, non-violence is the path to enlightenment. You know, that's the message from this meeting, I think. Okay, so any other points? We're coming to the end of our meeting. Sean,
I couldn't agree with you more that everybody that is that enters the old city before the Temple Mountain, the old city should sign a declaration, anti-violence declaration. I think it's very important to implement it. It's a first step, but a very important one.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to work with you on how we can do that. But that would mean the settlers can't walk around with their guns either. You know, no weapons.
Fine. Everybody who enters has to sign it. That's great. So no police, no ammunition. Great.
Okay. Well, I'll draft a declaration on that. Just.
Another thing is that, you know, Shambhala, if you, in Hebrew, if you drop it to, if you divide it into words, it means Shambhala. It means there God goes. The translation of this word in Hebrew, Shambhala.
Okay, Shambhala.
Shambhala, yeah. Okay,
well, I like that. I'm a process theologian. I believe God does go. He's a process, not a fixed.
Two words, Shambhala and Morya, you said, which is also the Temple Mountain, the name of the Temple Mountain in Hebrew. It's very interesting, the connection. I mean, it shows that there is a connection.
Well, you and I both believe in the Kabbalistic interpretation of sound.
Yes, definitely, yes.
And I think this whole, you know, the wars and conflicts of the planet are just because the linguists have been reading the wrong philology texts.
Yeah.
We should be reading the texts that point to the truth of St. John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word. You know, there's one word that we all come from, one unity, or the Shem, you say in Hebrew. And that sacred word is, or the Logos, we say in Greek, it wants peace, you know. It's as simple as that. George, can whilst you're here, can you tell us what your Catholic universities are doing across Africa? Because that's interesting. Are they teaching the theology of peace? And if so, how?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. We have, for example, in probably all Catholic universities, we teach philosophy to first-year students, to university students, undergraduates. And we also teach inter-religious, so different religions. So we, you know, our students learn a little bit about all different religious traditions. And in a special way, we have also begun working on teaching peace studies as actually a subject. And actually we are thinking, in fact, we have got a resolution since 2017 that all Catholic universities should have a department of peace studies. And this will definitely really help, you know, students learn. And actually, in my view, we should even go beyond university, go even below, to teach even secondary school, primary school students, and even kindergarten, so that, you know, they begin learning about peace at the very early stages. And that's something that we are now really working at. And when I became executive secretary of this Association of Catholic Universities and Higher Institutes of Africa and Madagascar, I decided that I should make peace the first priority. And that's why, of course, we see, for example, the webinars that we have. We are beginning now to even offer certificates. We are even thinking about giving even higher, you know, degrees. And so from the discussion here, as you already pointed out, we need to, I think, go back to basics. And for example, you talked about differentiating, you know, right from wrong, you know, that some people don't even know this. We go back to the roots, the study of philosophy, definitely. As I said, we also teach this to all our undergraduate students, but also religion, because sometimes the way I see that all religions talk about doing the will of God, right? But actually sometimes, or often, it turns out that we actually make God do our will, you know? So we are telling actually God what to do, what is right and wrong, according to our own image and likeness. And that's why, of course, as I said again earlier, that the question of Ubuntu should be able actually to guide us. And when you think that every person is equally important, then it's difficult to do harm. Yes, we are working on teaching even traditional religions at our universities, but we also teach philosophy. And well, actually, we have some institutes of peace studies already in Africa, of course, but they are not actually enough. We need, it's already a resolution, as I pointed out, that all universities should have a department of peace. Of course, at my university, we lack capacity in terms of staff, but this is something that we can work at. And fortunately now, we can see that through online avenues, we are able actually to reach out to many people and get scholars like yourselves, come in, give a course or whatever. So we are working on this, and yeah, we need really to go back to what our religions want us to do, not what we want our religions to do.
That's a very important.
So, thank you.
No, George, that's a very important point you make. Thank you very much. How many institutions, how many Catholic universities have you got in Africa? In your
we are 40 universities. 40.
40, yeah. No, that's
right.
Good. And if they can all get a peace studies department, that would be great. Any support you want, my institute will help, etc. Yeah. I would like to say I was good friends with a man called Archbishop Angelo Fernandez, who was the Archbishop of New Delhi, Indian. He was an Indian Catholic, and he was at Vatican II. He helped organize the Third World Caucus at Vatican II, and he was president of the Catholic Schools Association worldwide. I knew him quite well. He was a dear mentor and friend to me, and he would love the work you're doing, George. He's now in Shambhala, in the Christian wing of Shambhala. So, but he was 100% up there on peace education in all the Catholic schools worldwide. A great Indian intellectual, in fact. Look, dear friends, I think we're coming to the end of our allotted time. We've done our, any final thoughts, just quickly going around, last thoughts? If anyone wants to, Larissa, just a final thought from you. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to me, all my passionate and emotional things. So maybe for some therapeutic things it was important for me, but not only. Thank you for exchanging. It's a lot of things to think about.
Okay, no, it's our honor to have you here, and thank you so much. Sean, what last words?
Yes, again, thank everyone for their contributions. Very interesting. Just for the next meeting, what came to my mind was we should look at the difference between terrorist violence and some other form of violence, because I think that's a very big issue in relation to some of the explanations that virtuous violence. Thomas, I'd like to ask you a little bit about that idea, virtuous violence. I assume you've come across it as a concept, as a philosophical concept, as against terrorist violence. And I think a lot of the analysis we're doing here, we're kind of ignoring, is there a difference between the two? So maybe next meeting, and hopefully in a month's time, the situation in Ukraine will have just at least come to a ceasefire and people aren't being killed. That would be great. And
let's pray for that. Yeah, but no, that is a good point, Sean. The difference between the Ukrainian defenders having to use force and then the Russian aggressors, what's the existential difference between, is there such a thing as virtuous violence? I think you're probably right. Last thoughts from George. Yeah, briefly.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate also what has been going on today. And of course, I'd like to mention that Thomas will be joining us, giving us a talk also in our peace studies webinars. So please welcome. Of course, I will also invite you to talk philosophically about what is happening in the world, not only in Africa. And I'm a bit also a trained journalist. And I was thinking or wondering whether, while we have somebody from Ukraine speaking to us, maybe we should also have somebody from Russia giving us a different opinion. Someone from Israel is here, but someone from Palestine, maybe that will be helpful to balance, to have a rich debate, if that's possible. Thank you.
No, thank you, George. I did invite our Russian colleague to join us. We have a Russian philosopher on the board of the World Intellectual Forum, but he hasn't showed up. And he told me he's not able to engage. There is a problem of their being suppressed. And likewise, we have 2 or 3 Palestinians on our board. I invited them, they had the invite, but they haven't come. Now, I don't know why. I'll keep inviting them, I'll keep trying. I have many great Palestinian friends and Israeli, but they don't show up, It's not because we're not inviting them. I'd love them to come. Aaron, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would like to say at the last of this meeting, just like in engineering and technology, every year we have a lot of immense developments, and that we all accept wholeheartedly, and we accustom our life with the new developments. So in my opinion, I would like to say that why not, just like new Darwinism, new Lamarckism, everything comes. So why not we all should have our, upgradation in our religious thoughts. Like nothing should be stagnant and should be taken as a, just permanent. There should be, dynamism as per the need, as per the year, like time duration in the life. Like it is now 2022. So why not we all should have accepted the newer developments? And I'm sorry to say that few religions are so adamant and so orthodox that they are still taking each word by word of hundreds of years back. When we are not shy and hesitant to use the technology, then why not equally we should have upgrade our thoughts and vision as per the time dimension in that life. So like new NEO, new words should come up in the religious thoughts, and one should be ready to accept newer developments. Thank you, Professor Thomas.
No, thank you. Good thoughts, Aaron. So yes, this is why I wrote this, the periodic table of the world, which some of you have seen before. And it has a whole section on new religious movements, esoteric religions, as well as the old staples. And George, I'd love this to be in every one of your universities on the wall. It's a poster. It's like Mendeleev's table of the periodic elements. I've done it for all the religions and philosophies. So you have Kantianism, skepticism, Marxism, they're all there, all the isms. And unless we all master 168 boxes, we're illiterate in terms of religion and philosophy. That's as a professional expert in religious studies, I use this poster. So Aaron, I think we're on the same hymn sheet there.
Yes, exactly. I reverberate with your words. Thank you.
Good. Gila, any final thoughts?
Well, I think it was a very good meeting, and between us, we could have managed peace in the world. We could have agreed. And I would like to finish with, the Jewish say, love your friend as you love yourself. And that's the basic of Judaism.
Can you tell us that in Hebrew? How does it say in Hebrew?
ואהבת לרעך כמוך. Love your friend as you love yourself. It's like this Ubuntu thing that from Africa.
It probably goes back to the same source,
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah, it's a metaphysical co-recognition. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to.
Yeah, thank you.
In Jerusalem, yeah. Dr. Mishra, final thoughts from you, sir. If you unmute. Let's unmute the scientists of the world.
It's nice to be part of this discussion. I quite enjoyed to get different views. Firstly, I'd like to admire you for your points of declaration. And here I see how science and philosophy go together. I must say that the efforts put in by you in preparing the declaration is a matter of pride to all of us. The other point is that we spread too much on Israel and Palestine and then Russia and Ukraine. I wish we had more deeper discussion on one of the issues in our meetings, because too many points when we bring in, the main issue of the discussion gets diluted. So one of the suggestions will be that we should discuss more on one point and try to see what we can do and which way the world is going, and give our intellectual thought on those points. So thank you very much for giving a cross-section of the ideas and discussions that took place. I quite enjoyed it as a scientist. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So look, to everybody, thank you. Dr. Mishra, a typical scientist, wants us to focus on just one thing. I'm a philosopher and a generalist, and I like to do out between many things. And I think it's our duty to do a bit of both. I hope we've done some in-depth digging into these issues at this meeting. You know, maybe next month we should talk about Yemen and you know, some other zones, because these are also a problem. What's been happening in Yemen is shocking. So look, thank you, friends, and I will try and close the meeting down, and let's go forth and share what we can with those that will listen. You know, I do believe this work matters. I am an intellectual. I believe philosophy matters. I don't think there's anything, you know, that actually we could do more, really. Some people drive aid lorries, or, you know, I think we have to do this. This is our work as teachers. I just wish we could do more. One thing I thought about, and I'll finish with this, is, you know, this idea of twinning towns that we do in France. I'm twinned here in Bétet with a Bavarian village. I think they do twinning schools. I think UNESCO organizes that your school in Africa can twin with a school in Ukraine or England. I mean, maybe there's something there through UNESCO that we can do, so that, say, Russian school children or school children in other countries or Ukraine could do peace education work together. And because I'm the educational coordinator for the Delphic Games, that's something we're trying to implement, because the Delphic Games are about peace, ideas, intellectual work, the arts, music, dance, and so on. They were the parallel to the Olympic Games, and we've revived them. So if you didn't know that, the Delphic Games are up and running. We'd love to have schools all over the world sending young competitors to take part. It's much better to do the arts together than do killing and war. And it's the work of the muses that inspired philosophers like Plato and Socrates, and the tradition I come from of you know, European intellectual work.
Thomas, I have a question to you.
Yeah, go for it.
In today's discussion,
yeah,
the attire that you are wearing, does it signify something?
Yes, it's my Sufi hat that I bought in Turkey, and I just like it. I tend to wear it, and it's my, you know.
It is radiating philosophical thought. Therefore, I raise this point.
Yeah, I bought it near the tomb of Rumi, the great Sufi.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Follower of Rumi and the mystical Sufi tradition. I think God is a God of war. And I think what George said is the most important thing to take away, is we're committing blasphemy by trying to make God do our will. instead of the other way around. We should do God's will, you know. And so when Putin says to Kirill, bless my war in Ukraine, he's blaspheming. He's not doing God's will. He's cheating. He's making God his poodle that can bless his war, you know. So theologically, we have a lot to do, a lot of work to do. Right, thank you very much. I'm going to try and...
Thank you.
Thank you.
You better leave the meeting.
We meet again.
I'm struggling. My internet is weird.
Gila had many good points. Yes.
Gila,
thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Matthew.
Right.
I'm glad we did it. Shalom, shalom.
There's great. So look, if you'll have to leave the meeting one by one because I can't close it down at the moment. My computer's malfunctioning. So I can't actually stop the meeting because my cursor is giving me full stops. Basically, I need a new laptop. So forgive me for that. It's
very good. Excellent.
I'm going to struggle, but I will try and shut the meeting down. And then we can go back to our normal life. Right.
Okay, goodbye.
Okay, shalom. And anyway, if you have further questions or points, just email me. And you know, we'll meet again next month. And thank you to Nicola for helping. Yes, it's ridiculous. Right. Okay.